All right, deep divers, welcome back to Kadem. You guys ready for another deep dive with us today?
Always ready to dive in.
Okay, good, because today's topic is a doozy.
Yeah.
We're talking about that crazy storm system that just slammed the U.S. Tornadoes, dust storms, wildfires, you name it, this thing had it all.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable how one system could generate such a diverse array of extreme weather events all across the country.
Right, like it was hitting every region in a different way. I mean, we saw tornadoes ripping through Missouri, then you had those blinding dust storms in the Texas Panhandle, and then boom, wildfires exploding across multiple states. It's just insane.
And don't forget the blizzards up north.
Oh yeah, that's right. I mean, it's almost like Mother Nature was showing off her full repertoire of weather weapons all at once. So buckle up, deep divers, because we're going to unpack all of this craziness together. And hey, while you're here, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Kadem for more deep dives just like this one.
And don't forget to leave a comment below. Tell us what you think about this wild weather.
Okay, so let's start with those tornadoes in Missouri. You know, you don't usually think of Missouri as Tornado Alley like you do with Kansas or Oklahoma, right?
Right.
But this storm system spawned multiple tornadoes, even one near St. Louis. So what made this region suddenly a hotbed for twisters?
Well, tornadoes can occur in Missouri, but they're usually not as frequent or as intense as what you see in the Great Plains. What happened here was kind of a perfect storm of atmospheric conditions. This system pulled in a lot of warm, moist air from the south, and that created a really unstable atmosphere, like shaking up a bottle of soda. All that pent-up energy has to go somewhere, and in this case, it manifested as those powerful rotating winds.
Wow, that soda analogy really paints a vivid picture.
Yeah.
And you know, speaking of explosive power, our source mentions a strip mall in Rolla, Missouri that got absolutely hammered by one of these tornadoes. It's just mind-boggling the force it must take to rip through a structure like that. Have any of you deep divers ever experienced a tornado? Drop a comment below and let us know about it.
And those tornadoes were just the beginning of the chaos. Over in the Texas Panhandle, we saw a different kind of extreme weather take hold, those blinding dust storms.
Yeah, those dust storms. I can't even imagine trying to drive in those conditions.
Yeah.
The source talks about near-zero visibility leading to multiple car pileups. One even involved an estimated 38 vehicles. Emergency responders were struggling just to navigate through the dust. It's terrifying.
It really is. And tragically, 3 people lost their lives in those dust storm-related crashes. One Texas Department of Public Safety sergeant even described it as the worst I've ever seen. So yeah, it was a really serious situation.
It's just a stark reminder of how powerful nature can be. And it makes you think about the potential consequences of a changing climate. Have any of you ever driven through a dust storm? Let us know in the comments.
But wait, there's more. This storm system wasn't done yet. It moved on to wreak havoc in a completely different way. Wildfires.
Oh man, those wildfires. Over 130 of them erupted across Oklahoma alone. That number just blows my mind. The source describes a truck driver on I-40 who was just terrified that his trailer was going to be flipped over by the wind. I mean, can you picture the sheer terror of driving through that inferno?
And those high winds, combined with the incredibly dry conditions we've been seeing across several states, it created perfect conditions for those fires to spread really rapidly, like throwing gasoline on an already raging fire.
Okay, so let's recap here. We've got tornadoes in Missouri, dust storms in Texas, and now wildfires engulfing Oklahoma. It's like this storm system was a greatest hits compilation of extreme weather. If you guys are finding this deep dive as mind-blowing as I am, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Kadem for more incredible content.
And this was just the beginning of the wildfire situation. These things weren't just contained to Oklahoma. They spread across a huge area, impacting communities in Texas, Kansas, Missouri, even New Mexico.
It's just insane how one storm system could cause so much devastation across such a wide area. In Roberts County, Texas, a fire exploded from less than a square mile to over 32 square miles in a terrifyingly short amount of time. And the human cost is just heartbreaking. You've got people forced to evacuate their homes, firefighters risking their lives to contain these infernos. It's just devastating.
It really is. And the scale and intensity of these wildfires, it raises a really important question. Are we prepared for this? I mean, are we doing enough to prepare for the increasing threat of wildfires in a world where climate change is a reality? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
Yeah, it's a question we all need to be thinking about for sure. And these wildfires, they're a stark reminder of how interconnected our climate system really is, right? And what happens in one part of the country or even the world can have ripple effects elsewhere.
Yes.
And, you know, this brings us to another interesting point. While all this was going on in the south and central regions, this same storm system brought a totally different kind of extreme weather to the northern plains blizzards. Whoa, hold on. So you're telling me that while some people are running from wildfires, others are dealing with snowstorms. Talk about weather whiplash.
It is pretty wild, right? It really highlights the sheer scope and power of this particular storm system. It was like a meteorological kaleidoscope, capable of producing all sorts of extreme weather depending on where it was and what the atmospheric conditions were like.
Okay, so how does one system manage to produce such drastically different weather phenomena? It's mind-boggling.
Well, it all boils down to this complex interplay of, air masses, temperature gradients, and moisture. And in this case, as the storm system moved north, it started pulling in cold, moist air from the north, and boom, you've got the perfect conditions for blizzard formation in the northern plains.
Wow, so it's like Mother Nature was flexing, showing us just how much power she really has. The source mentioned some areas getting up to a foot of snow. Can you imagine going from worrying about wildfires one day to shoveling snow the next? That's crazy.
It really is a dramatic illustration of how interconnected our weather patterns are. And it also, brings us to another important point that we've kind of been dancing around this whole time, climate change.
Yeah, it's definitely the elephant in the room, isn't it? It's hard to say for sure that any specific weather event is directly caused by climate change. But these extreme events are happening more and more often, and that definitely aligns with what scientists have been warning us about for years.
Absolutely. It's a lot like trying to pinpoint whether a specific cigarette caused someone's lung cancer. It's nearly impossible to say for sure, but the overall trend is undeniable.
Exactly. And just like with smoking and lung cancer, the scientific evidence overwhelmingly points to this link between climate change and the increasing prevalence of extreme weather all around the world.
Exactly, and that pattern is likely to continue, especially as global temperatures rise. We can expect to see more intense heat waves, longer droughts, more devastating floods, and even more powerful storms like the one we're talking about today.
It's a sobering thought. It makes you wonder, are we doing enough to prepare for this future? A future with more frequent and more intense extreme weather. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments below.
Yeah, that's a really important question and one that deserves its own deep dive. But for now, let's shift gears back to the storm system and really break down the science behind these extreme weather events in more detail.
Sounds good to me. We've talked about tornadoes, dust storms, wildfires, and blizzards. But what's the common thread here? How did this one system manage to create such a crazy mix of weather?
Well, at the heart of it all is this idea of atmospheric instability. It's kind of like the engine that drives all these extreme weather events.
Okay, so break that down for us. What exactly is atmospheric instability?
All right, so imagine the atmosphere is like a giant layer cake with different layers of air at different temperatures, right?
Okay, I'm following you.
Now, when you get a layer of warm, moist air trapped beneath a layer of cold, dry air, things start to get really interesting. It's like shaking up a bottle of champagne. All that pent-up energy is just waiting for a trigger to release.
And those triggers can be all sorts of things, right? Like a front moving through or changes in wind patterns.
Exactly. And depending on the specific conditions, that release of energy can turn into anything from a thunderstorm to a tornado to a blizzard.
So this storm system was basically a giant atmospheric pressure cooker with all these different ingredients simmering away, just waiting to erupt into a meteorological mess.
That's a great way to put it. And the main ingredient fueling this chaos was all that warm, moist air being pulled in from the Gulf of Mexico.
The Gulf, the ultimate moisture supplier.
Exactly. And that warm, moist air acted like fuel for the storm system. It's what gave it the energy to generate those powerful thunderstorms and tornadoes. And then as the system moved north and that moisture combined with the cold air from the north, well, that's what created those perfect blizzard conditions.
It's amazing how one ingredient can have such different effects on the weather, depending on where it is and what it interacts with. If you're loving this deep dive, don't forget to smash that like button and share this video with your friends.
And subscribe to Kadem for more awesome content like this. Now let's break down each of these extreme weather events in a little more detail, starting with tornadoes.
All right, let's get twisty. So what are the main ingredients you need to cook up a tornado?
Well, as we mentioned before, you need that unstable atmosphere where you've got warm, moist air trapped under cold, dry air. And that creates a strong updraft, like a hot air balloon taking off.
So it's kind of like the atmosphere is trying to flip itself inside out.
Pretty much. Now, if you throw wind shear into the mix, things get even more interesting. Wind shear is just a fancy way of saying that the wind is blowing in different directions at different altitudes.
Okay, so the wind is going one way up high and a different way down low.
Exactly. And that difference in wind direction can actually cause the updraft to start rotating, and that's what forms that spinning column of air. Ah, so that's how you get that classic funnel shape. Makes sense.
Right. Now, as that spinning column of air stretches and tightens, it becomes a tornado. And the faster the winds spin, the stronger the tornado gets.
It's like a meteorological ballet with all these different forces working together to create this incredible and sometimes terrifying phenomenon.
It's a really delicate balance. And even small changes in these conditions can have a huge impact on the outcome.
Speaking of delicate balances, let's talk about those dust storms that hit the Texas Panhandle. What caused those walls of dust to appear out of nowhere?
Well, the key ingredient for a dust storm is no surprise here, dust. And in the Texas Panhandle, there was a lot of it thanks to those drought conditions and land degradation. It's like the ground was just waiting for a strong gust of wind to come along and sweep it all up.
And those strong winds were provided by our friendly neighborhood storm system, right?
Got it. As that system moved across the region, it whipped up some seriously strong winds, and they just tore across all that dry, exposed soil, lifting tons of dust into the air. The source actually describes it as a wall of dirt advancing across the land, swallowing everything in its path. It sounds pretty scary.
It is scary, and it's dangerous, too. Dust storms can reduce visibility to almost nothing, which makes driving incredibly risky.
And we already talked about the tragic loss of life from those dust storm-related crashes. It really drives home the point that these extreme weather events can have very real consequences.
That's why being prepared is so important. Knowing what to do in those situations can literally save your life.
For sure. If you ever find yourself driving into a dust storm, the best thing to do is pull over to the side of the road, turn off your lights, and wait it out. Don't mess with Mother Nature when she's angry.
Good advice. All right, ready to tackle those raging wildfires.
Let's burn through it. What are the main things that led to those massive infernos across so many states?
Well, we touched on this earlier, but basically the combo of super dry conditions and high winds created the perfect recipe for a wildfire disaster.
It's like setting the stage for a giant fireworks show, only this time nobody bought tickets, and the consequences are way more serious.
Exactly. And the drought across most of the Southwest had left all that vegetation incredibly dry and ready to burn. It was like a giant tinderbox just waiting for a spark.
And unfortunately, those sparks came from all sorts of sources. Lightning strikes, downed power lines, even something as small as a cigarette butt can start a fire under those conditions.
Right, and once those fires get going, those high winds act like a giant bellows, fanning the flames and making them spread like crazy.
So it's like the fire is creating its own wind and just feeding itself. That's terrifying.
It's a scary feedback loop for sure. And the source mentions this crazy statistic. The fire in Roberts County, Texas grew from less than a square mile to over 32 square miles in just a few hours. It's mind-blowing how quickly things can escalate when all the right conditions are in place.
It really shows the destructive power of wildfires and how much of a threat they pose, especially as our planet gets warmer. What can we do about it? How can we prepare for these wildfires that seem to be getting worse and worse?
Yeah.
Let us know your thoughts in the comments.
It's a question we all need to be thinking about and talking about. Yeah, it's definitely something to think about. But like you always say, knowledge is power, right? The more we understand these things, the better prepared we'll be to deal with them and, adapt to this crazy world.
So true. So let's wrap up this deep dive by talking about the last piece of this weather puzzle, those blizzards up in the northern plains. I mean, it's just so wild to me that the same system that's causing heat waves and wildfires can also dump a ton of snow on another part of the country.
It really shows how dynamic our atmosphere is, right? All these different factors interacting to create these crazy weather patterns.
Okay, so walk us through the science here. How does a single storm system pull off this crazy weather switcheroo?
Well, the storm system was huge. It covered a massive area, and as it moved across the country, it was pulling in all these different air masses, each with its own temperature and moisture content.
So it's like a giant atmospheric blender just mixing up all these different ingredients to create this meteorological cocktail.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Now, as the system moved north, it ran into this mass of cold, dry air that was just sitting over the northern plains. And that cold air was denser than the warm, moist air that was fueling the storms down south.
So it's like a clash of the titans, warm, moist air versus cold, dry air. Who's going to win?
And when these two air masses collided, the warm, moist air got forced upwards.
Hold on. Didn't we say earlier that rising warm air is what causes those thunderstorms and tornadoes?
You got it.
Yeah.
And in this case, the rising warm air did help create some pretty intense snowstorms.
Okay, but how does rising warm air make blizzards instead of thunderstorms? Seems counterintuitive.
It all has to do with the temperature way up high in the atmosphere. When that rising warm air hits that super cold air up there, all the moisture in that warm air quickly turns into ice crystals.
Ah, so instead of raindrops, you get snowflakes.
Bingo. And as those snowflakes fall, they bump into other ice crystals and they get bigger and heavier.
Like a snowball effect, only in the sky.
Exactly. And once those snowflakes get heavy enough, they fall to the ground as snow. And then when you add in the strong winds from the storm system, you've got yourself a blizzard.
It's just amazing to me how these small changes in temperature and moisture can have such a huge impact on the weather. Mother Nature is a pretty amazing artist, even if her work can be a little bit scary sometimes.
For sure. And it's important to remember that these aren't just isolated events. They're all connected. They're influenced by global weather patterns, and they're being amplified by climate change.
Definitely something to think about. We need to be aware of these changes in the weather, prepare for more extreme events, and most importantly, we need to take action to fight climate change and protect our planet.
Well said. And remember, knowledge is power, so keep asking questions, keep learning, and share what you learn with others.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive into extreme weather, hit that like button and subscribe to Kadem for more incredible content just like this. Thanks for diving in with us, deep divers. We'll see you in the next one.